Okay, we are reading some more of Captain Underpants and the terrifying return of Tippy Tinkletrousers. We're up to chapter 5, I believe. The Unveiling. One brisk evening in late October, the entire prison was yawning with excitement. The prisoners had all gathered in the bleachers under a clear moonlit sky as the prison band played a slow, reverent and deeply moving rendition of Whoomp, There It Is. After everyone dried their eyes, Warden Gordon Borden Schmorden stepped onto the stage to congratulate himself. He proudly bragged about his great humility, confessed his intense hatred of intolerant people, and spoke for hours about his legendary brevity. Then the moment of truth arrived. Tippy Tinkletrousers' statue was finally ready to be shown to the world. With great theatrical flair, Tippy proudly strutted out to the courtyard and grabbed hold of the giant green tarp. "Gentlemen and gentlemen," he announced, "it gives me great pleasure to get the heck out of here." Tippy pulled on the tarp and revealed his creation. "Hey!" shouted Warden Gordon Borden Schmorden. "That statue doesn't have a head." "It's not a statue," yelled Tippy as he climbed a tall ladder up to the cockpit on top. "It's a giant robo-suit, and after I escape from this horrible prison, I'm going to put an end to that nonsensical nuisance, Captain Underpants." Tippy wiggled into the tiny cockpit and started up the engines. Suddenly, the colossal contraption came to life. Its mighty chest heaved as its gigantic gorilla-like arms swayed threateningly. "Sound the alarm!" screamed Warden Schmorden. "Stop that guy!" Armed guards ran in every direction while sirens wailed and prisoners screamed for their lives. Massive searchlights swept across the sky as the metallic behemoth took its first thunderous steps towards freedom. Suddenly, Tippy stopped and thought for a moment. "Hey, I know where I saw that guy before," he said. Tippy searched the crowds of panicking prisoners until he found the one he was looking for. The giant hand of Tippy's robo-suit reached down and plucked Mr. Krupp from the crowd. "I knew I'd recognised you from somewhere," said Tippy. "You're the principal of that school I shrank last year." "Oh yeah," said Mr. Krupp. "I remember you now. You're that Professor Poopy Pants guy." "My name is not Professor Poopy Pants," screamed the angry villain. "That was a ridiculous name, so I changed it to Tippy Tinkletrousers." "Gee, that's a lot better," said Mr. Krupp sarcastically. Tippy glared into Mr. Krupp's defiant eyes. "I shall ignore your impudence on one condition," Tippy said. "Tell me where I can find George Beard and Harold Hutchins." "George and Harold?" asked Mr. Krupp as he dangled precariously from Tippy's giant robotic fingertips. "What do you want with those two?" "Those boys have something to do with Captain Underpants," said Tippy. "I've seen them all together. They know each other. I'm sure of it." "Well, they should be pretty easy to find," said Mr. Krupp. "They're both locked up at the Piqua Juvenile Detention Centre." "They're in juvie, eh?" said Tippy with a sinister smirk. "Then that's where we're gonna go." Tippy clutched Mr. Krupp tightly in his robotic fist as he stomped forward, crushing the armoured watchtower and smashing through cell block B. "Freeze all, shoot!" shouted the guards. "How about if I shoot and you freeze?" said Tippy as he pressed a button on his control panel, causing a giant door in the chest of his robo-suit to swing open. A massive laser shooter poked out from the mechanical depths of the robo-suit and zapped the armed guards. Suddenly, they were transformed into frozen statues. "What did you just do?" screamed Mr. Krupp hysterically. "Oh, relax," said Tippy. "It's just my Freeze Beam 4000. It temporarily freezes whatever it zaps for as long as I choose. Those guards will thaw out in about 10 minutes, and they'll be perfectly fine." Tippy's heaving mechanical monstrosity thundered through the prison parking lot, battering buses and crushing cars as it headed toward the Piqua Juvenile Detention Centre. "I just don't get it," said Mr. Krupp. "What's so important about Captain Underpants?" "That ridiculous superhero foiled my plot to take over the planet and enslave humanity," shouted Tippy. "He's the reason I got locked up. Everybody knows that, said Mr. Krupp, but what's going to stop him from defeating you again? Oh, don't you worry your sweaty little head about that, said Tippy. I've got a few tricks up my sleeve this time. Chapter 6. Calling Captor Underpants. Meanwhile, across town at Piquard Juvenile Detention Centre, George and Harold were getting ready for bed. You know, said George, I don't really mind being stuck here in juvie. Yeah, said Harold. It's not much different from our old school, except that they have library books here. And a music teacher, said George. And an art teacher, said Harold. As the two boys discussed the similarities between elementary school and forced confinement in a harsh and authoritarian penal institute, they heard the sounds of booming footsteps getting louder and louder. Soon their entire building began to shake violently with each thundering stride. George and Harold dashed to their windows and saw Tippy's terrifying robo-suit stomping toward them, freezing anyone and everything that stood in its way. "Oh no," screamed Harold. "We're doomed!" Tippy stopped at the main entrance to the centre and demanded to speak with whoever was in charge. After a few minutes, the centre's administrator, Director Hector Schmechter, showed up nervously at the door. Said Director Schmechter, may I help you? Do you have two kids in there named George Beard and Harold Hutchins? Shouted Tippy. Oh, yeah, said Director Schmechter. Those two kids are nothing but trouble. They're always pulling pranks, too. I mean, you can't sit on a toilet around here without getting ketchup sprayed in your underwear. And last week they... Just hand them over, Tippy interrupted. Hey, no prob, Director Schmechter chuckled, trying to sound cool. Director Hector Schmechter pranced excitedly to George and Harold's cell, grabbed them by the arms and escorted them to the front door. "This'll teach you for putting hair remover in my shampoo," said Director Schmechter. Hector tossed the boys outside and locked the door. George and Harold stood trembling before Tippy's massive robo-suit as the crazed inventor chuckled menacingly. "Hello, George and Harold," crowed Tippy. "Remember me?" The boys were too frightened to speak. "Hey, Tippy," said Mr. Krupp. "You don't need me any more, do you? I told you where you could find the brats, right? You can let me go now, right?" "I guess so," said Tippy. He set Mr. Krupp down on the ground by George and Harold. "Ha!" Mr. Krupp laughed. "I never thought I'd be happy to see you two kids again. You bubs are in big trouble now." Almost without thinking, George and Harold reached out their hands and snapped their fingers. Snap, snap. Oh, no. Suddenly, a ridiculously optimistic smile spread across Mr. Krupp's face. "Hey," cried Tippy, "what's going on down there?" What George and Harold knew, and what Tippy was about to discover, was that Mr. Krupp was transforming into the world's greatest superhero, Captain Underpants. Quickly, before he wiggled out of his purple prison jumpsuit, flipped his shoes away, and peeled off his sweaty toupee. The only thing missing was his cape. He looked around the detention centre, but couldn't find anything suitable. "I can't be a superhero without my cape," said Captain Underpants. "You're okay," George assured him. "Yeah," said Harold, "you don't need a cape. Seriously." "Sorry," said the captain, "but you gotta look fine if you're going to fight crime." And with no time to spare, Captain Underpants flew off to find a cape. That guy was Captain Underpants," cried Tippy. "Doy!" said George. "Ah!" screamed Tippy. "I just had him in my hand. I could have crushed him." Again, George responded with the only intelligent word that could possibly be applied in such a situation. "Doy!" Meanwhile, Captain Underpants had flown to a nearby shopping centre which was having its semi-annual lazy storytelling sale. "Quick!" cried Captain Underpants. "Do you guys sell superhero capes?" "You betcha," said the employee cheerfully. "They're in aisle 39 between the diaries and the wizard hats." "Awesome!" cried Captain Underpants. In no time at all, our hero found a cape, tied it around his neck, and flew off into the night to face his mortal enemy.